This is something I don't usually do. Typically, if I make a track talk themed video, I like to focus on one particular subject, but after watching day 4 of the Olympic trials, I think I'm going to try something a little bit different. So let's get right into it. We had a few pretty big finals today, 4 to be specific. Technically 5 if you want to count the heptathlon on the track. But we had the men's 1500, the men's 400, and then the women's 5K, and of course the women's 800. Special shout out to Grant Holloway with his 12:92 world lead in the first round of the 110 meter hurdles. I mean, oh my gosh, he looked like he could have challenged the world record had he run that race like a final. Just fresh run, great execution, and he backed off at the end. So who knows what's in store from him. We know what he's done on Hayward Field. Not going to really get into that narrative today. If you want to hear about that narrative, just go and find another channel that's willing to delve a little bit deeper into that, because that's not what I'm here to do today. Anyways, jumping right into the men's 1500, that was definitely a race I was looking forward to, mostly because one of my favorite athletes made it to that final against all circumstances, and that was Craig Engels. I mean, come on. You got to love Craig. Was I expecting him to make it? No, not at all. But I can't imagine he was either. We've seen a couple of athletes kind of go into the trials with that house money mentality, nothing to lose. And I feel like Craig was sort of in that scenario, but of course, using his veteranship probably gave him a bit of a chip on his shoulder as well. All the fan support, I'd imagine it's a little bit overwhelming just knowing how much of a fan favorite he is, almost feeling like he has something to prove. And he ran his 4th fastest career performance, so let's give him his stripes for that. At age 30, whatever lies ahead for him, just God bless Craig Engels, man. But the bigger takeaway from the overall race that happened ahead was Cole Hocker. He made a huge move, 250 to go, passing up Yared Nuguse, the American record holder, and he held on to take the win for the second trials in a row. And this was huge for Cole because he proved that he can win in a fast and tactical race. Because, obviously the lap splits were varying. That second lap was like a 59, and the third lap, they winded it up to about a 56, and he closed in, I want to say, a 54. I didn't take a full look at the splits, but it was right around 236 down to a 330. So, yeah, Cole Hocker really knows how to come alive on that last lap. And I'm not going to say anything about the track that he was running on. I think it's more about who he was running against, because Yared Nuguse, he's shown the ability to kick very well also. I did a whole video on that after his indoor Wanamaker mile back in 2023. And to know that Cole Hocker could kind of take back that face of the mid-distances here in Team USA, I think that was a big statement for him. Maybe not to the shush centro degree of the 2021 trials, but more so just Cole Hocker reminding everybody that he's still here. I was talking to a couple friends earlier today, and they almost felt like because Cole Hocker is the least talked about of the guys in contention, like the Craig Engelses, even the Liam Murphys and the Ethan Strands, the Collegians, the Joe Wascoms, the Nathan Greens making it to that final, it's more so a reminder of who he is and who he can be, and who he's going to need to be if he wants to get on that Olympic podium with guys like Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr waiting. And, of course, Timothy Chariot and others as well. It's going to be an absolutely loaded event in Paris. Cannot wait. But, yeah, huge kudos to Craig for giving it his all, and huge kudos to Yared Nuguse for still getting to the Olympics as well, because that's another thing. He made it last time, but sort of like Lee Diffie was saying on NBC, you can't really consider yourself an Olympian until you toe that line. And he hasn't been racing a whole lot, as many of the top contenders have not been. And so just getting second was all he needed to do. Get the wheels turning a little bit in that final 100. A little bit of a wake-up call, knowing that he has kind of seen that he's not invincible. And so that'll make things really interesting with Cole and others, including Hobbs Kessler, who, another guy who competed at trials last time. He was still a high schooler then, didn't make it out of the semis, but he was put under some really big-time pressure by Vince Ciotti in that home straightaway, and he just kind of had to hold his own, and he did. So that's it for the men's 1500. Women's heptathlon, I believe I mentioned that off the top. Anna Hall, what more can you say there? I was personally expecting her to make the team, but, just the way that she did it. Obviously, she's one of the most seen multi-event specialists, arguably the most seen multi-event specialist anywhere nowadays, including the men that partake in the decathlon. I mean, shoot, Zach Zymek isn't even on social media, so there you go. But Anna Hall, just a great comeback story. There's not really much more than I could say than that. It was cool how they had the Jackie Joyner-Kersee feature in there, surprising her mid-interview and, asking her about her post-race. Just good storytelling nuggets there. So that'll be interesting. And men's 400. I said I was looking forward to the 1500. The men's 400 was probably the race that I was looking forward to tonight. And it wasn't just because of Quincy Wilson, who my last video was about. Michael Norman, I was curious to see what he would do after having arguably the easiest path anyone could have to get to the finals of an Olympic trials. He basically jogged in his semifinal and won his heat in 45.3. Now, while he arguably had that easiest path, like I said, that might have been a bit of a curse as much as it was a blessing for Michael Norman, because Quincy Hall actually had to go hard to make it to the finals. He had a pretty quick prelim and a pretty quick semi, and to me it almost seemed like because he had that my friend, I'll quote him on this, the kill switch, or that killer instinct almost. That's what allowed him to come off of that turn and run down Michael Norman in the home straightaway. And I feel like for Michael, again, it's the trials, so the goal is to make the Olympics. He'll tune up and get that finish squared away so that he'll be ready to go for his first Olympic medal. So I'm not worried about him. Chris Bailey, a huge finish for him as well. The big knack on him, well, not necessarily knack, but, getting out-kicked by Alexander Doom of Belgium in the World Indoor 4x4 Finals. He doesn't want that moment to define him. Similar to Vernon Norwood back in 2018 Birmingham when he got out-kicked by Jakub Szewina of Poland. It's all about the psychological, mental victories, creating those for yourself. And that's what Bailey did by getting to this Olympic team. He would have been on the relay pool had he not gotten third, which, of course, again, has to be delegated to Vernon Norwood. It's such a tough break for Vernon, a guy that's been there almost forever. And Vernon, to Team USA almost, is as Kévin Borlée is to the world when we consider 4x4s. Because Vernon Norwood, up until last year when there was basically no choice for Team USA, though he had picked up all sorts of different hardware from running the prelims, getting Team USA to the 4x4 finals, up until last year he had not appeared in a single global outdoor final that had won gold for Team USA. And I genuinely feel like he should have been on the 2022 team. And I genuinely feel like, based on the finish that we saw today from him, based on what we've seen from him through the years in 4x4s, just as such a great team player for Team USA, he needs to be on that 4x4 final if Team USA doesn't have any mishaps in the prelims. Now, as for those prelims, I'd imagine Quincy Wilson, that's where he'll get his chance to shine, if not the mixed relay. I mean, I wasn't not expecting him to place top 3, if I'm being quite honest. And the fact that he did as well as he did is incredible. He had his 3 fastest career performances all within 4 days of each other. And he still managed to put on a very impressive finish in the last 100 meters despite having tired legs. He closed in 11:98 out of lane number 2 after having done all that work around those tight bends. The kid still came and delivered and made a whole lot of people proud. I mean, you should really see how much his social media presence has grown, and really just his whole athletic stock, because there's no more questions. He is the next prodigy of our sport, and it's just been a pleasure to watch. I did get to meet Quincy, actually, at the 2023 New Balance Nationals outdoor meet. I had just kind of gone by for a day. I was in the area, the Philly, Jersey area, and walking through the stands, there was Quincy, and I went up and introduced myself. I think I called him, like, Mr. Quincy, or just something out of respect for the kid, because, that's just what you got to display to people like that. And, huge congrats to him for making it here. And we'll see what happens in Paris with the guys that made it for the individual team. And fingers crossed that Vernon Norwood gets what he deserves. If we have a contentious 4x4 final, then I sure do hope that Vernon Norwood gets a steak But, of course, that's going to be tough. Relay politics are always complicated. We saw that indoors. Noah Lyles. I'm going to leave it at that when it comes to the 4x4 politics. Maybe I'll talk about that in another video if you guys want me to. But I think it's time to move on quickly to the women's 5K. Not too much for me to say here. Just a great race. Parker Valby, she made that race, as we all saw, and as pretty much all of us acknowledged, because it was starting out tactically like a jog fest, and Parker knew that she had no chance if it was to remain that way. So she just went straight to the front and made it her own race. Even if she knew that the veterans behind her were probably going to outkick her in the end, that didn't stop her from running her own race, and I commend her for that, as much as I do for Schweitzer, St. Pierre, and Cranny, of course, as they put on a show in those final 800 meters, just running away. Trials record, 14:40, and though I don't know if Ellie's going to have the exact same fortune that she did in the indoor 3K, just all the best to her moving forward, and we'll see what she does in the 1500, which is arguably her better event, predominantly. So, yeah. Obviously, Faith Kipyegon's going to be the favorite in those two events if she chooses to do the double. Not sure what Sifan Hassan's going to go for, but Faith, after what we saw last year, I mean, how can you not have faith in her? Arguably the GOAT of women's distance running based on times, and after these Paris Olympics, if things go to plan for the champ from Kenya, she could go down as one of the greatest of all time. And that's really all there is to be said there. Definitely an exciting race. Not one that's going to make as much headlines as some other races, admittedly, which is always tough. But one that definitely breeds and fosters a lot of developing storylines. Again, Parker Valby, off a very long collegiate season, she's still going to Paris for the 10K after all. So with that in her legs, makes it that much more impressive that she was still able to hang on and set a new collegiate record that previously belonged to herself in 14:52. So, yeah, huge props to her there. And this is far from the last time that we'll be seeing her. And we thought the same thing 3 years ago, about another collegiate star at the time, and that was Athing Mu, who at age 19 won the Olympic title in 2021 and was all but slated to return to Paris and go for another Olympic gold here in 2024. But as we saw, as things currently stand, that is not going to happen because of the early fall that she suffered. It was so heartbreaking. I was just like, no. And the whole track community felt the same way. And even for some other women that were caught up in that fall in the first 200 meters, Sage Herta-Klecker, she was at the back of that pack. Obviously, Raven Rogers right behind. It was all incidental contact, of course, because that's what happens when you got all these runners conglomerated right together going into a turn nonetheless. So disaster was almost imminent. I was a little shocked that Athing didn't get out quicker and try and take command of this race, knowing what had happened 3 years prior at the Olympic trials, getting her heels clipped right around the same spot on the track by, well, I don't think it was but sweeping up Nia Akins, who ended up winning this year. Just the ultimate reversal of fortunes in the most unimaginable way possible. I saw a thing on Twitter from Let'sRun.com about the rules. I didn't really read too much into it, but apparently the rules allow for a rerun of the event. And I feel like because there were other women than Athing Mu affected by the collision, by the commotion, it kind of affected everyone to some degree. I feel like if that were to happen, then the top three in Juliette Whittaker, Allie Wilson, and Nia Akins, of course, they shouldn't have to run that because they already earned their way by placing top three in the race that happened. They should not have to run again because, I mean, just come on. That's like, you feel like you've accomplished your Olympic dream and now you got to go and work for it all again with no guarantees. I mean, that would just be brutal for them. But I feel like if there were to be a rerun, this is just my hypothetical, that you should take every other woman that was in that final, and whoever wins that goes on as a fourth member on her protest. I mean, I don't know how that would fly with World Athletics, of course, but, you know, a guy can think and scheme up ideas. And I must say, too, it was tough seeing a Thing's reaction, and I will say I do agree with those who said get the camera off of Thing. But as for her, I'm going to leave it at that. I don't know. That's another thing to consider. I don't know if she'll be allowed to re-enter in the 1500, because obviously Bobby Kersey has stated before that he sees the Thing as being able to juggle both events, the 800 and the 15. Even coming from an 8-4 background, I don't know. It feels like just one of the harshest realities that the sport can bring around. It doesn't feel real that a Thing Mo is going to be missing out on the Paris Olympics. It doesn't feel real that Keely Hodgkinson, assuming that she maintains the form that she's in, I know she had a little bit of illness at the European Championships, still coming away with the win, but assuming nobody else besides her, Mary Marat, I mean, who's going to challenge at this point? We're not going to get the rematch that we had in Budapest, and that's just another career-defining moment, perhaps. What can you say? But that's just the beauty of the sport. It gives opportunities for those mental victories. Like I talked about before with Chris Bailey, from the 4x4 indoors, coming back to make it as an individual outdoors. And we'll see what these women make of it. A Thing, Sage, Raven, and the others, of course. It's going to be interesting. I'll be staying tuned for updates. Got a few days in between the next Olympic trials action, so that'll give us a little bit more time to digest what we've seen and plot ahead for the future. Mwahaha. Anyways, who knows? Maybe I'll make a reaction video or two. I was planning on doing one initially for the 400, but I decided to just watch the trials with my dad instead, which was fun. I've been educating him a little bit on the sport, and it's been nice to share some of that wealth of knowledge. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and potentially stay tuned for more. No promises, no guarantees, but hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, subscribe for more, and peace.